Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope that you are so far having a great week. It's Tuesday morning here in the States. Hope you enjoyed the fights this weekend. And let me give my reaction. Now, first, let me apologize. I was supposed to go live yesterday, but family stuff and work stuff. And so I had to reschedule multiple times. Honestly, I was supposed to go live at 11 Eastern here. It's currently 10 Eastern, but I wanted to jump on early because my schedule freed up because I'm sure something will pop up soon and my schedule will get busy again. So, wanted to pull up real quick while I had some time and let you guys know my thoughts on the big fight this weekend. And let's not forget, there was a big fight Sunday as well, and really give my thoughts on the subsequent fan reaction, media reaction, and some of the debates that are going on right now and will continue to go on in the weeks and months and maybe even years to come. So we will go into all of that. I'm not going to have phones because I just don't have time right now. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to go. I'll at least go for 30 minutes, but I'm just going to cook for a while. I'm just going to spit. And I hope you guys appreciate what I have to say. Get in on the chat. And if you have any questions, comments, whatever, let me know. But if you have some afterwards, because I know a lot of you are expecting me to go on later today. So I'm probably, I'm not going to have as many people watching the live. You can hit me up later, DM me, respond to the post on social, and give me your thoughts and let me know what you agree with, what you don't agree with, etc. So let's get right into this, man. Terence Crawford scores a unanimous decision win over Canelo Alvarez. Two of the scores were very close, 7 rounds to 5, and then one score was 8 rounds to 4. I think that third score was closer to what most people had. Watching live, I 8-4, I guess I'm good with. I could also see 9-3 for that fight. 7-5, a little too close in my opinion, but I guess you can make a realistic case if you're giving Canelo all the swing rounds. Maybe you see it that close. But either way, I mean, Crawford was clearly the winner, right? So there's a couple of discussions that this fight and the result prompted. One is who's the pound for pound king currently in the sport? Second, who is the fighter of this past generation? And I think when you're looking at this generation, I would say it's the last 10 years. I would say, because I talked about this in my preview video last week, Floyd Mayweather, who is the king of the last generation, what I call the Floyd, Manny, Vlad generation. Those are the three all-time greats from that era. His last fight was 2015, his last real fight, 2015, right? So basically those 10 years, 2015 to 2025, who's been the guy? Who's the fighter of this generation? Now, the broadcast on Netflix, particularly Max Kellerman, really let you know who they thought it was. But there's people debating that online currently. And so I want to give my thoughts on that, give my thoughts on the current pound for pound debate. And then there's the fight itself and properly assessing what took place and the level of Crawford's accomplishment as it relates or as it rates historically, all time. I personally feel that a lot of people are kind of getting a little caught up in the moment and maybe exaggerating the historical significance of this fight and this win. So I will provide my feelings and context to all of that. Okay. And then I'll also get in the chat with you guys and respond to questions and stuff that you have. Okay. So let's start with the fight itself. So pretty much went the way I thought it would. And I've been pretty consistent with my feeling on this fight. And when I used the term gut feel, my feeling on the fight, I didn't mean like I had zero thoughts about it or reasoning and it was just a feeling. No, here's my feel, here's my take on the fight, right? And I told you guys literally since last summer when it wasn't safe to say it, by the way, I told you Bud points, and I wasn't the only one, but it sure felt like most people out there, and I'm sure you guys would agree with this, most of the pundits, the media people, the fans, the podcasters, the YouTubers, etc., were saying Canelo is going to be too big, too much of a size difference, right? And the Canelo fan base, which is huge, it's the biggest fan base in boxing right now, at least in North America, they were making their voice heard, saying, our boy is going to knock Bud out because he's just too big and too strong. And Crawford's never been hit like this. Crawford was hurt against Gamboa in a lightweight fight, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the narrative when this was not even a signed fight, when it was just first being discussed. But even then, you guys were asking me right here on this show, again, go back and check the video. And then you could check my posts on X for the last year plus. I gave my thoughts and I said, my feel on this, my take is Bud points. And over the months, over the last year, I've given my reasoning for that. And my reasoning has remained consistent. And so now, thus, post-fight, I must continue to provide that reasoning and why I have to provide context when we are rating this fight and the historical significance of it. All the things I've been saying for the past year still matter. They don't suddenly disappear just because the fight's over. And perhaps it didn't go the way some of you out there thought it was going to go. And you're shocked and your system is jolted. Well, if you looked at my reasoning leading up to this, it played out pretty much exactly like I said it would. I'm no Nostradamus. I could just see things, and I spoke honestly about it. I gave my honest take. I did find it interesting that the week of the fight, suddenly it seemed all of the pundits, all the podcasters, all the media people, suddenly were picking Crawford when they weren't 6 months ago, 12 months ago. They were either radio silent or they're just saying, man, the size is going to be too much. Did you see how Crawford looked against Madrimov? Oh, boy, this isn't going to be good. All those people, oh, Madrimov, he barely beat Madrimov. What happens when he fights Canelo? Oh, my gosh, this is going to be one-sided. All those people suddenly, the week of the fight, they started to switch. And honestly, I think two things happened. So I think fight week, the media members who hadn't necessarily been around Canelo for a while got around him. Obviously, it's fight week. You go to the fight week festivities, the fighter entrances, fighter press conferences, the stare downs, all that stuff, right? And they started to see the things that I've been seeing for years and I've been talking about for years and I've taken shit for 4 years. By the way, I might swear a few times today, so I apologize to those of you who are sensitive to language. I preemptively apologize, okay? Because I'm probably going to start ranting soon because I have to. But the things I've been talking about, body language, just the look and feel of a guy, his eyes, all of it. I'm not even talking about results in the ring. I'm talking about stuff outside the ring. I've covered Canelo's career extensively. Again, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole for the 100th time. I've seen the guy in person and in the ring and in the gym and all of it. And I saw things years ago that I think a lot of people in the media just kind of didn't want to see. But this week, they couldn't ignore it. It was almost like, I'm sorry to go political for 10 seconds. I have to. But it was almost like anyone with half a functioning brain could see that the former president was cognitively challenged and compromised going back to the 2020 national election. And a lot of people just didn't want to see it. But last summer, there was that debate where y'all just couldn't ignore it anymore. And you finally had to address it, right? That's kind of like what this was. I know, not a perfect analogy, but you see where I'm going, right? I think a lot of people during fight week saw that Canelo was half checked out, going through the motions, wasn't laser sharp focused. And here's the thing with Canelo. He's a consummate professional. He's never going to show up and not be in shape. He's never going to take a guy lightly. He's not going to pull a Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou kind of a thing. Never going to do that. Doesn't matter who he's fighting. He's showing up in shape. He's punching his clock every morning at the office and doing his thing because he's a consummate professional. But he hasn't been on that razor's edge, to use a Rocky reference. He hasn't had that eye of the tiger for quite some time. And I think the media people, the pundits, saw that last week in Vegas during fight week. And then they looked at Crawford, who was zoned in, 100% dialed in, laser focused, eye of the tiger, all of it, just as much as he's ever been. And they were like, oh, shit, that guy is going to win the fight. That guy's here going through the motions. That guy's here to whoop some ass. Yeah, I'm picking him. That's what happened last week. So basically, the things that I've seen since fucking 2021, 2022, a lot of y'all finally fucking reconciled with last week. The second part, I've talked to several bookies, people who work in that business, odds makers, bookmakers, whatever you want to call it, both in Vegas and in some not so necessarily legal operations in other parts of the country. Okay. Remember who some of my friends are. And they all said the same thing. Obviously, the odds tightened the week of the fight. But the only reason it didn't flip and Crawford became the favorite is because there is significant money from Mexico still going on Canelo. A lot of the Mexican whales came in and continued putting money on Canelo. But several of my bookie guys told me, as we got closer to the fight, and particularly fight week, all of the American bettors, all of them were betting Crawford. And a lot of the overseas guys, the whales from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, parts of Europe, all betting Crawford. All of them. And I think some of the media guys heard that too, because they have some of the same friends I do. And it swayed their pick. It suddenly became safe to say Crawford was going to win. So then they did, because they're all fucking pussies. I say the hard thing when it's hard to say. I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the few. Anyway, yes, I'm patting myself on the back. If that bothers you, don't give a shit. I deserve it. So all that money is coming in. And the Mexican whales, the Mexican-American fans coming in, the fans from the Mexicans coming in, they're putting money on Canelo. That's keeping him up as a favorite on the line. But all this other money coming in is coming in on Crawford. And I think a lot of the bookies are like, oh, shit, let's change these odds a bit. And so we can still make money here. And you saw the value is on the draw. Why was the draw paying out so well? Way, way, way better than Crawford points. I'm just saying, okay? People knew what was happening. Anyway, the fight itself played out pretty much like I said it would. It was fought at a technical pace. Neither guy threw a whole lot of punches. There was a lot of feinting and jockeying for position, a lot of counter punching from both guys because they're natural counter punchers. Canelo threw a one punch at a time, as he's been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. And so coming in the week of the fight, last week when I did my preview show, I was getting nervous about two things. And I was getting in my head about it. One, Crawford's inactivity. Would that play a factor here? It did not. It did not, because Canelo is so far past his prime that he was not able to push Crawford and make the inactivity a factor. You know who was? Israel Madrimov. That's part of why Crawford didn't look good in that Madrimov fight, because his inactivity showed. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together until after this weekend. It was like, oh, so that's what it was. That combined with the fact that Crawford does not do well with the Eastern European style. Never has. The only guys that have ever made him look kind of pedestrian have been Eastern European fighters. He just does not do well with that style. Even when he dominantly wins, he doesn't look as special. Doesn't like fighting that style. Had there been a dominant Eastern European fighter at 140, 147 during Crawford's era, I don't think he'd be undefeated. Maybe not. Maybe he still would be, but there would have been a real tough fight for him in there. He doesn't like that style. So the inactivity showed because he looked sloppy and tentative at times and just not as sharp against Madrimov. It didn't show against Canelo because I think Crawford, first of all, rises to the occasion with certain, when he's in there with a different kind of opponent. But also, Canelo is not at the stage of his career where he can force that issue and make the inactivity a real factor in the fight. Second thing I got in my head about was Vegas judges, right? And thank goodness, just like in the Bivol fight, they got the right man, right? And so both Bivol and Crawford beat Canelo so decisively that they couldn't rob the guys the way that they fucked Golovkin in 2017. So By the way, I think today is the 8-year anniversary of that fight, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Crazy to think it's been almost a decade since that fight. It was, and obviously you all that follow me remember what took place after that fight, the post-fight press conference, me and NSAC director Bob Bennett getting into it. That was a moment that kind of changed my career and changed my life. So I'll never forget it. But man, it's been like 8 years, I think, to the day, because it popped up in my memories yesterday that it was 8 years since the weigh-in, where I was at the weigh-in for that event. So anyway, crazy, right? Omar Rodriguez says, so you basically came online to masturbate yourself. Not exactly. I won't put you guys through that. But, maybe just a tip. No, I'm joking. Omar, come on. Let me have a little bit of fun. Come on. Let me talk a little bit of shit. Everyone likes to talk shit to me and against me. Come on. Let me cook a little bit here. Rock Loggins with the super chat. Thank you so much, my brother. He says, skills pay the bills. And Brandon Adams' first win against Sergey Bohachuk was no fluke. You're absolutely correct, my man, because he beat him again and rather decisively, right? Bohachuk, look, I like Sergey. He's an exciting fighter, but his level's kind of been revealed. I don't think Brandon Adams is some pound for pound level dude, obviously, but he's just a little bit better than Bohachuk. But I will say this, their two fights were really entertaining. If they want to fight 10 more times, I'd watch that shit. Okay. Let's see what else. So the fight plays out the way that I thought it would, pretty much. And so Bud Crawford gets the W. And so then you have the reaction, right? And so let's talk about that. First of all, let me quickly talk about the Netflix broadcast and some of the people on that broadcast. I thought some of the people did a great job, and I like them. I like the work that they do. Some of them really, no knock, okay? I'm not going to name names, but some of them just have no business being on camera or on a microphone. They're just not that good at it, and they don't have the stage presence for it. That's not a knock. That's just my honest, and I'm not alone, my honest take on it as a guy that's dabbled in many facets of the entertainment industry, including the media, the fight press. You either have that or you don't. And some of these guys that were on that broadcast team, they have really good agents. They play the game. They do favors, all that stuff. And that's how they get the work that they get. But they're misplaced in some of these roles. And they just didn't belong on the broadcast. They're better reporting news and stuff, off a microphone, off a camera. But that being said, the actual production of this show was outstanding. Netflix crushed it. In Turkey and everyone involved crushed it. It looked fantastic. The look and feel of the broadcast, it looked like you were watching something special, like you were watching a special historic kind of event. Whether it was or not, we'll get into, but it looked like almost Super Bowl level production, which is what I used to think of when I watched HBO boxing. And I mean, clearly HBO boxing was the pinnacle of boxing broadcasting in America for decades. They were the top dog, right? Everyone else is just a little bit below them. Even if they had better fights, the production wasn't the same. So this was the best production I've seen of a show in America since HBO boxing. So on that note, I have to give everybody involved with it just tremendous credit. Well done. In my opinion, this set a new standard. It was better than HBO's production. Better. And it should be better because the technology is better and all the stuff, right? And Netflix is a streaming app, and it's maybe the premier streaming app in terms of like broadcast, stuff, sports, whatever, movies out there. And they did a wonderful job. So this really set a new standard, a new bar, and that was really cool to see. I do feel that some of the people on the broadcast team, I'm going to specifically call out Max Kellerman here. I understand that when these guys are hired, they're hired by the promotion, which includes the streaming platform, the network, what have you, not to just be analysts or pundits now. They're kind of quasi promoters, and they're part of the promotion team. And thus they're there to kind of push a narrative. And they're meeting, the production team meets in a room and they say, okay, guys, here's what we're trying to convey to the fan base. And in this particular case, you're on regular Netflix. So you're talking to a lot of casual sports fans. You're talking to a lot of MMA fans, those sorts of people who are watching. Here's the storyline we want to push. Okay. And they really do this. I've been in those production meetings. Here's the points we really want to push. Here's the points we kind of want to tone down a bit, right? There's that steering committee early on, and they go through all that. And so I get that the commentary crew is there to kind of do that job. But Max kind of just went above. He went a little too far with some of it for my taste. The constant, Terence Crawford's the GOAT, and just the constant push of that throughout the broadcast. And then during the post-fight interview, listen, dude, Max doesn't need my advice. He's abundantly more successful than I'll ever be. And Max is good at what he does, and I understand why he was there. I get it. He did what they paid him to do. But I would say, just as a note, as a fan, as a watcher, a viewer, I should say a viewer of this broadcast and future broadcasts, save the personal feelings about something until the post-fight. If you think back to, I mentioned HBO. Every HBO broadcast, after the fights and after the post-fight interview, Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant, and whether it was George Foreman or Roy Jones, they'd sit or they'd stand by the ring. Remember those shots? They'd stand by the ring and just give their final thoughts. And that's where they injected their opinion, their worldview, whatever, onto the event. And that's where Larry would say, thanks, Jim. And he'd turn and look into the camera and gaze into the viewer's eyes and give his thoughts, right? And no one could do it like Larry could. But Jim would usually give his thoughts, which usually included him crying at some point about something. He could have been talking about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He'd probably cry. That's what Jim does. But and I say that, and Jim's maybe the best to ever do it, okay? So I say that lovingly. But that's when they would give their personal thoughts. Not during the interview. There'd be a little bit during the broadcast, okay, during a fight, especially Larry. If the fight sucked, he'd let you know. But what I'm saying is Max just bloviating and just, he was literally tearing up while he was interviewing Terence Crawford and pushing this viewpoint about him being the GOAT. And then he said, I mean the GOAT of this generation. Well, how can you be the greatest of all time of a generation? That doesn't add up. That terminology doesn't work, dude. So say the GOG, the greatest of a generation. You're the GOG. You're the GOAG, Terence. You're the GOAG of this era. Change the definition or something, dude. But you can't be the greatest of all time of a specific set of years. You're either all time means all years. So anyway, that section in the post-fight interview was a little too cringeworthy for me. Again, I get why Max was there and why he did what he did. He just went a little too far with it for my taste. But that commentary and the absolute refusal to mention Alexander Usyk, who's clearly in the discussion of the best fighter of this generation and the fellow generational talent of this era, right? So to me, it's Crawford and it's Usyk. These have been the two true generational talents of the 2015 through 2025 era. The only reason I don't include Inoue in that yet is because I think Inoue is still carving out his legacy, and he's more of like a 2020s era fighter. We're going to be talking about Inoue from 2020 to 2030 one day, the bulk of his work. So he just came a little after Usyk and Crawford, right? So obviously I include Inoue in the current pound for pound king talk, which we'll get to. But fighter of the era, it's between Crawford and Usyk. And you can't mention Usyk without mentioning Crawford. You can't mention Crawford without mentioning Usyk. So for Max to get on his knees, I honestly, I was ready to turn around. I was like pulling back from the screen as I was watching, because I thought at one point he was potentially going to get on his knees and reach for Bud Crawford's dick, or at least one of his balls, maybe even both. I was like getting ready to coil away from the TV because I don't want to see that shit, right? That's how much it was just over the top. And the tears and like the weird pauses because he was starting to tear up, like all that was strange. A little too much, Max. A little too much, Netflix. Pull that back in the next broadcast. However, that commentary got the discussion and the debate started online instantly. And that's when I started to notice a lot of the fans and media out there moving goalposts, rewriting narratives, changing the rules. And that's when I started to get a little annoyed. I wasn't surprised. It was a very predictable reaction. But here are some of the examples of things I'm seeing. Okay. First of all, I've seen people saying that Terence Crawford is the greatest fighter of all time because he beat Canelo. That this is one of the greatest wins in the history of boxing. Guys, I like Bud. I've been a fan of Terence Crawford for a decade or more. Go back and check the record on this. I've been rating him pound for pound. At different times, I had him number one, but certainly near the top of my list for like a decade now. Go back and watch the video. It's all there. Okay. I'm certainly not a hater. And that's the thing. Like, this video is going to make me seem like a hater of Crawford, Canelo, and Mayweather. I got to bring his name up. I didn't start doing that. People online did, so I have to address it. But I'm certainly the furthest thing from any of that. It's just, in my lifetime of boxing, this win by Crawford isn't even in the top 10 of greatest wins I've seen. It's just not. It's not on that level. And the reason why I say that, there's several, but I have to go back to my reasoning over this last year, right? And there's a thing called consistency and staying on tune. And I try to do that as a sports fan. And I try to do that in all facets of my life. Keep the same energy, as the kids say, right? Don't flip the script when things don't go the way you expected them. They go a different way. So you have to flip the script to try to justify things in your head. No, stay consistent. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Coming into this fight, I told you all, size difference ain't going to be shit. I put numbers to it, and I compared what Usyk faced going against Fury. I could have also mentioned Joshua. I could have mentioned Dubois. But what he faced going against those guys was significantly more of a disadvantage than what Crawford did against Canelo. So the whole size difference thing, people made way too much out of that. And I mentioned in many posts on X, because people said, well, the size difference was too much for Charlo. And I was like, yeah, Charlo is nowhere near as good of a fighter as Crawford is. So that's null and void. I told you all that the size difference wasn't going to be a factor. Was I right or wrong about that? Go ahead and give me my flowers. I was right. It didn't mean a fucking thing in this fight. In fact, from the outside and even from the mid-range, it's Crawford who looks stronger, which I told many of you all. Don't be surprised if he looks stronger in there at certain points of the fight. He was the one pushing Canelo back at times. I mean, anyway, it wasn't a factor, right? I told you all that Canelo had lost a step. He's actually lost 2 steps. He's nowhere near the guy he was. Peak Canelo was 2017, 2018, 2019. Maybe you give him 2020. Right in there. That's peak Canelo. Okay? The last time he fought an elite opponent, and I mentioned this ad nauseum, was in 2022. How'd he do in that fight? How'd he do against Dimitri Bivol? Was that fight super competitive? Was it super close? No, it wasn't. At best, he won 3 rounds in that fight. At best. I actually thought that fight was wider than this fight against Crawford, and I'll put numbers to that in just a minute. So I mentioned all that coming in, not to take away, because I've been accused now, oh, you just want to take away from Crawford's accomplishment. No, I'm not just pulling this shit out of my ass now because I thought Canelo was going to win. No. I've been picking Bud the whole time for these reasons. So if I've been saying this for over a year, and my justification for picking Bud was because of all these things, it applies now after the fact too. So when I'm assessing this fight and the historical significance of it, the level of accomplishment as it rates historically, I have to add all that context, all that nuance. That matters. And I get it. 50 years from now, boxing fans are going to pull up the box rec and they're just going to see Terence Crawford beat Canelo Alvarez to become undisputed champion in a third weight class. And none of the nuance is going to matter because they're not going to know about any of that. And they're just going to say, holy shit, this guy was undisputed in 3 weights, the first guy to do it in the 4-belt era. Crawford's legacy is secure. I'm saying, as a historian and a guy that follows this sport like a lunatic, right? You got to be a deranged lunatic if you follow it as closely as everyone watching this show right now does. So we're all deranged boxing diehards, right? All that nuance matters. And if I'm going to properly historically rate this fight in the performance and all of it, then I have to include all that. That's all I'm saying. So, and then when we're talking about rating fighter of this generation, and it's either Bud or Usyk, those are the 2 guys. I don't think anyone would deny that. Well, then we have to start including all this nuance, right? So before I go any further, let me share my screen real quick. I asked you guys, well, first let me give let me show this poll. And actually, let me pull this up and make sure I got the latest and greatest. Okay, so I asked a poll, and I just posted it this morning, so I barely have any responses yet. But which fight was closer on your scorecard? Bivol, Canelo, or Crawford, Canelo? So far, 2/3 of you agree with me that Crawford, Canelo was the closer fight. And I give some statistics to back this up. So let me show here. The punch stats, according to CompuBox, and I know I can hear all of you groaning the second I mention CompuBox. Here's the thing. If you think CompuBox was biased toward Canelo against Crawford, I would agree with you. But I also would hold that same standard to both fights. I think they were biased toward Canelo in the Bivol fight. So you can't have it one way and not the other, right? You have to be consistent, right? The whole name of the game, the theme of the show is going to be consistency, keeping the same energy. So if they were biased toward Canelo against Crawford, then they were biased toward Canelo against Bivol, okay? So all things being even, according to CompuBox, Bivol landed 152 total punches and Canelo landed 84. So he almost doubled the amount of landed punches. He connected also on over 100 power punches, Bivol did. Canelo only landed 17 of his total punches. I'm not talking jabs. I'm talking total punches. So Bivol's defense was outstanding in that fight as well. And what do you always hear? Going into that fight, you heard, well, Canelo's going to walk him down and throw those looping punches over the top and work the body, just like he did against Plant and Saunders. How'd that work out for him? Now, according to CompuBox, Bud landed 115 total punches, and Canelo landed 99 with 29% accuracy. So Bud threw about 200 less punches than Bivol. The bigger guy was more active. Imagine that. Bivol was significantly more active than Crawford, threw 200 more punches, lands more, and Crawford lands less and allows Canelo to land more and at a much higher accuracy, almost twice as accurate. Canelo was almost twice as accurate against Crawford as he was against Bivol. Again, I think Canelo got credit for a lot of punches that were blocked by Crawford. I also think he got a lot of credit for punches that were blocked by Bivol. I'm keeping the same energy here. All right. Bud outlanded Canelo in 4 of 12 rounds. Bivol outlanded Canelo in every fucking round. So just by punch numbers, and I know you don't score a fight on punch numbers, I get it, but you do score a fight round by round. Bivol outworked, outthrew, and outconnected Canelo in every single round of their fight. According to CompuBox, Bud only did in 4 rounds. So when I say that the Crawford-Canelo fight was actually closer in terms of rounds, that's just part of my reasoning. I could get into more and go down that rabbit hole, but that's just putting some quick numbers on it, okay? I think a lot of people have recency bias, and they're getting ahead of themselves and thinking that Crawford's win was more dominant. Keep in mind, too, Crawford beat a guy that's 3 years older than the guy Bivol beat. Bivol beat a guy who had just knocked out Caleb Plant to become undisputed. Crawford beat a guy that's been allowed to hold on to his undisputed championship for 3 years, fighting B and C level opposition solely due to politics and money. because he's the money man in the sport. Think of how many undisputed champions we've seen in recent years that were immediately stripped. Josh Taylor comes to mind, but so does Crawford. They went after Crawford when he became undisputed, right? There's other ones I could mention, but like these guys get stripped within weeks sometimes, definitely within months. Canelo was able to hold on to his undisputed championship fighting. I understand he lost the IBF briefly, but got it back when he fought Skull. But he's been, look at the guys he's been fighting, and he was allowed to hold on to this championship, right? So all that context matters. Again, not trying to take away from Bud's accomplishment, but let's be real about this. Let's talk about the level of fighter and where that fighter was at this stage of their career, and the undisputed part. How did that happen as well? Again, Canelo was allowed to hold on to this undisputed championship. Do you guys think, ask me or answer me this question. If Billy Joe Saunders or Caleb Plant or Callum Smith had become the undisputed super middleweight champion, do you think any of you think that they would have been allowed to not fight David Benavidez and hold on to that WBC belt? If you do, you're lying. You're being intellectually dishonest. You know damn well, within 5 minutes of them winning the undisputed championship, Mauricio Suleiman and the BC would have mandated that they had a couple of months to sign a fight with David Benavidez, or they'd be stripped of the BC. Only Canelo was allowed to not fight David Benavidez. They actually made, the BC made Benavidez the mandatory at 2 weights, right? Remember that? At 68 and 75, to allow both of them to navigate appropriately. So Canelo didn't have to fight him, and Benavidez could still get in line for an undisputed championship, either at 75, because obviously it wasn't going to happen at 68. All of these things have to be included when we're rating Crawford's accomplishment from a historical perspective, which is, how does he rate fighter of this generation? Is it him or is it Usyk? Now, fans shifting goalposts and all this stuff. I find it very, very, very funny that a lot of the same people who were calling Crawford an Uncle Tom. I'm sorry to use that term. I know it's offensive. I think it's a disgusting term, but I wasn't the one using it. I'm stating it to repeat what other people were saying. Okay. I'm not using it because I would never go there. But there were a lot of American fight fans, quote unquote, I say fans with quotes, calling Terence Crawford that because he was signed to Top Rank and fighting on ESPN. And they didn't want him to fight Errol Spence because they knew he was going to whoop Errol Spence's ass, because they knew that Crawford was the real deal and Spence wasn't. And so they called him those names. They didn't, the WBO ain't shit. We don't recognize the WBO championship. An entire platform, Showtime Boxing, would not even include the WBO when they would talk about the welterweight champions. They wouldn't even include Terence Crawford's name when talking about the top welterweights. They did this for years. All those same people are now suddenly Team Bud when it's between Bud and Usyk for fighter of the generation. I can't imagine why. I can't imagine why they're suddenly on Team Bud. I can't really put my finger on it, but suddenly they're Team Crawford. All the people that were calling them all those disgusting names for years. That's interesting. I also find it interesting that the people that were literally comparing Tyson Fury to Muhammad Ali, remember those tweets? I do. I've bookmarked some of them. They were calling him an all-time great. They were saying he'd be a nightmare for any heavyweight in the history of boxing. They'd favor him against Ali and Lewis in the same night, right? Why were they doing that? Because they had to boost him up to boost up their guy, Deontay Wilder, right? Those same guys are now saying that Fury was an overrated tub of lard. He was 722% body fat when he fought Usyk. So the size difference don't mean shit, because he was 812% body fat when he fought Usyk. He was 672 years old. He was dominated by Francis Ngannou, and he was 100% for that fight and took it seriously. He wasn't getting coked up and getting drunk every night and just having sex all night and not even sparring going into the Ngannou fight. No. That's just rumors. He was 100%. The version of Fury that Usyk beat was the same version that Ngannou fought. Exact same version. Okay. I love how these narratives change. By the way, even if Tyson Fury was 6,722% body fat against Usyk, he's still 6 inches fucking taller. His back is twice as wide. His fucking head is twice as big. His arms are significantly longer. He's still a mountain of a man and significantly larger and stronger than Usyk. No matter how much fat, still 6 inches taller. Was Canelo Alvarez 6 inches taller than Terence Crawford? Was his head twice the size? Well, maybe because of some of the things he did outside the ring. Okay, I'll give you that. Were his arms significantly longer? I mean, come on, guys. How about Anthony Joshua twice? Is there any fat on Anthony Joshua's body? No. So the size difference scale is still significantly. The mountain Usyk had to climb to fight Joshua twice, to fight Dubois twice in their backyard in London. Significantly higher, larger of a mountain to climb than Crawford had to. And again, I don't say this to take away from Crawford's accomplishment. Also, last time I checked, I'm doing a little math here. Crawford's American, right? Where did this fight take place? Oh, it took place in America. Okay. When's the last time Usyk fought in Ukraine? Oh, okay. Did he fight Fury in Ukraine? Did you fight Joshua in Ukraine? Did you fight Dubois in Ukraine? No? Okay. So there's that. Okay. Again, goalposts moving. Suddenly Fury's overrated. He's shot to shit. Blah, 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 blah. He really wasn't that much bigger than Usyk because it was all just body fat. Never mind height and reach and natural strength. And I guess Joshua was 100% body fat, and so was Dubois. I just love these narrative shifts and these goalposts changing. It's just insane. Boxing fans are fucking exhausting. Now, I made a tweet that went viral comparing the size difference between Fury and Usyk and Canelo and Crawford. And all the people that bookmarked it and all the Canelo fans that were like, you're an idiot, Canelo's going to knock him out. Suddenly, they disappeared. Isn't that fun? But I did have I was trying to convey a different point in that tweet as well, and I just worded it poorly. What I was trying to say is Fury was closer to his prime when Usyk beat him, particularly in the first fight is what I was talking about, than Canelo is right now when Crawford beat him. And I know that's going to have a lot of you out there disagreeing with me. I could get into numbers and stuff behind all that and how heavyweights age much, much slower than little guys, particularly little guys who have moved up, which Canelo did. I could get into all that. I'll just stick with this. Tyson Fury. Let me quickly pull up his resume here. Tyson Fury, box rec. Jesus, I can't type. All right, let me pull this up because I want to show this to you guys. I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, so I get it. Francis Ngannou was the fight right before Usyk, and he didn't look spectacular in that fight. But in the 3 fights before that, hell, the 4 fights before it, he had knockout wins over Derek Chisora, knockout win over Dillian White as well, and 2 knockout wins over Deontay Wilder, right? But let's forget the Wilder fights. Let's just stick with the year or 2 before he fought Usyk, okay? He fights Usyk for the first time in May of 24. So going back 2 years to the spring of 22, he knocks out Dillian White, who at that time, or around that time, had been rated a top 5 heavyweight. And then he knocks out Derek Chisora. Now, he had fought those guys 612 times. I get it. But he knocked those guys out. Now, I'm not going to pull up Canelo's resume. I'm not going to do it. But you guys, I think, know where I'm going to go here, right? Canelo was fighting guys like John Ryder, an ancient semi-retired Golovkin, a vastly overrated, moving up several divisions, Charlo, Berlanga, who was a journeyman. I've been saying that for years too. Skull, right? All these guys he fought. How many of them did he knock out? Oh, that's right. None. Okay. Would you rate any of those guys? Not any of them. Would you rate all of them significantly higher than you'd rate Dillian White? If you are, you're being intellectually dishonest again. I'm talking about at 168. Were any of those guys proven to be a top 10, 168 guy or top five who had had some significant wins in that division, the way Dillian White had done at heavyweight? Again, I'm not trying to suggest that Dillian White is a Hall of Famer, an all-time great. I'm not trying to suggest anything near that. I remember he got decapitated when he fought Alexander Povetkin in 2020. What happened in the rematch? You guys remember the rematch? Who won that fight? He knocked out Povetkin. After the fight against Tyson Fury, where he got knocked out, he fought Jermaine Franklin. How'd that fight go? Oh, that's right. He beat Jermaine Franklin, who just had a significant win on the undercard this weekend. Huh. You don't say. I think a lot of you guys are forgetting some nuance. I think a lot of you are having recency bias. My position, and again, I could go into some other aspects of this, but my position is that Fury stopping a guy like Dillian White within a year or two of fighting Usyk proves he was closer to his prime than Canelo, who took Edgar Berlanga the distance within, what, a year of fighting Crawford? How'd Berlanga's next fight go? He took Jaime Munguia the distance. How'd Munguia's next fight go? Interesting. I can continue, but I'll stop there. My position is that Fury was closer to his prime than Canelo was this weekend when Usyk fought him the first time and had a significant, undeniable size advantage against Usyk. Usyk's win over Fury the first time around was a better win in virtually every way than Crawford's win over Canelo. If that bothers you, guess what? I don't give a flying fuck. I'm the guy who has data and numbers to back up my position. You don't. You just have feelings and thoughts. Cool. Stick with that. See where it gets you in life. All I'm saying is, if we're going to talk about Usyk versus Crawford, fighter of the generation, we have to include that nuance. Crawford has two significant wins in his career. Two. Errol Spence and Canelo Alvarez, right? If you want to include his third best win is Madrimov. How's Errol Spence done since him and Crawford fought? Oh, that's right. He hasn't fought. He's literally 0-0 since Crawford beat him. How did Madrimov do in his next fight after him and Crawford fought? Oh, that's right. He lost pretty decisively. Do any of you think that Canelo Alvarez is about to go on a big epic run and reel off wins against David Benavidez, Iglesias, guys like that? Yeah, you know he's not going to. I think you see my point here. All the people that were refusing to give Crawford a shred of credit when he beat Spence's ass because, man, Spence was in a car accident. 8,000 bones in his body were broken. He was dead, clinically dead for 4 hours. They had to bring him back to life. He had a near-death experience. He went to heaven and came back. All the stuff, right? Refused to give him any credit. Are suddenly like, man, he beat Spence. He's the greatest fighter of all time. What changed, guys? I'm just the one over here who's been consistent with my reasoning. Okay. So look, if you have Crawford as the best fighter of this generation, you're allowed to, and you get no beef from me. And all I'm asking is, because intellectually, I can understand how a person could have that position. Okay, totally. I get it. Just in terms of like on paper accomplishment, being undisputed in 3 weight classes, that might be enough for your what you rate. Okay, so like I get that. For your protocol or whatever, it's how many divisions have you been undisputed? For Crawford, it's 3. For Usyk, it's 2. For Inoue, it's 2. So you give the edge to Crawford. Okay, I can intellectually understand that. I just request humbly that you remain consistent with your reasoning. You don't move the goalpost and change things after the fact because things didn't go the way you wanted them to go. That's all. You will get no beef from me if we disagree on who the fighter of this generation is. For me, it's still Alexander Usyk. But Terence Crawford is right there. And here's the thing. Both of them, in my opinion, and I've been saying this for years as well. Go back and check the record. In fact, I've been saying this about Crawford before he fucked up Errol Spence. Before he fought Errol Spence. Both Crawford and Usyk are generational talents who compete in any era. I've been saying that. I'm not pulling that out of my ass now. I've been saying it. I've been saying it about Usyk since before he beat Fury. I've been saying it about Crawford since before he beat Spence, let alone Canelo. Just asking for consistency, guys. Now, same thing with the current pound-for-pound king talk. There's obviously three guys. It's Crawford, it's Usyk, it's Inoue. You will get zero argument from me, regardless of how you rate those three, as long as those are your three. Because those three are clearly above the rest. And I'm including Bivol in that. I got Bivol right behind him at number 4. But I think that these three guys have just separated themselves from the pack, right? So if you got Inoue first, then Crawford, then Usyk, whatever, you're not going to get any beef from me. You have your rationale and what you rate and what matters more to you, and you have your justification for that rating. As long as you have those three top guys, you get no beef from me. But I want to bring up Naoya Inoue because he did have a fight this Sunday, this weekend, and I thought his win over Akhmadaliev was every bit as impressive as Crawford's win against Canelo. And again, that's not to diminish Crawford's accomplishment, but let's put this into perspective. Inoue beat a guy who was a unified title holder, had beat legit top guys in the division, hadn't avoided anybody, and he whooped his ass. And this guy, Akhmadaliev, is still in his prime. And the run that Inoue has been on in recent years is better, you could argue, than anyone in the sport. I'm not necessarily saying I fully agree with that, but you could make the argument. That's my whole point here, guys. You could make the argument. I tweeted this. I've made a couple of posts about Inoue in recent days that have all gone viral. Somebody posted in just 26 months, Inoue has cleaned out his division going 7-0. And then he gives the names: Stephen Fulton, Marlon Tapalis, Louis Neri, TJ Dueni, Yejun Kim, Ramon Cardenas, and Murtajan Akhmadaliev. So for perspective, Terence Crawford and Alexander Usyk have each fought 3 times over that time span. So Inoue has been twice as active, and he's dominated this list of opponents. And of course, I responded sarcastically because I just love to sometimes. I love the troll. And I quote, and I said, but there's only one American on that list, but I don't know any of those other guys. But he needs to fight in America. But he needs to move up and fight Crawford. He needs to learn English. He looks different than me. Brainless, predictable American boxing fans. That's got 1.6 thousand likes. I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction to that post. There's another one I want to find here that I was surprised really went viral that has like almost 4,000 likes that I posted about Bivol. I'm sorry, about Inoue. Here we go. So somebody posted a clip from the Inoue Akhmadaliev fight, and I retweeted it, and I just said the fact that Inoue just outclassed a former unified title holder will fall on deaf ears for most American fans simply because they cannot pronounce the opponent's name. A lot of pound-for-pound talk going on this weekend. Let's not forget about this Japanese kid. And this tweet went absolutely viral. Hundreds of thousands of views and interactions, thousands of likes. I wasn't expecting that, but it shows that there's a global fan base in boxing that tends to agree with some of these takes I'm having. Maybe the American fans don't, because there's a lot of ethnocentrism going on. But globally, there's a lot of people who share these takes. Another thing about Inoue, I looked at the resumes of Inoue, Usyk, and Crawford in the 2020s. Okay, so I'm talking since 2019, since the COVID outbreak. Inoue is 12-0 with 11 knockouts. His top wins are against Donaire, Fulton, Neri, Akhmadaliev. Now, they were all in Japan. None of them were on the road. So there is that. Crawford is 6-0, literally has half the fights of Inoue this decade. I'm not talking about the last year or two. I'm talking this decade, 6-0. His big wins are Spence, Madrimov, and Canelo. Combined, Spence, Madrimov, and Canelo are 0-1 since fighting Bud. Obviously, Canelo hasn't fought, but Spence hasn't fought once. Madrimov fought once, and he lost decisively. And then Usyk is 7-0. Oh, I should also mention for Bud, he hasn't traveled at all. All those fights have been here in America, right? He's fought a fellow American and then 2 non-Americans here in America. And then Usyk, top wins. Usyk is 7-0, so he's got one more fight than Crawford this decade. I should add, though, that he had to wait for Joshua, that rematch, and he had to wait for Fury, that rematch. Hell, he had to wait for Fury, the first fight. So he was kind of in a holding pattern to get those big fights, or he was contractually held for a rematch. He couldn't do what he wanted to do. He kind of had to play the game. That's at least partially the reason why he's been inactive this decade. There's been some other stuff, injuries. There was also, I don't know, a fucking war going on in his homeland. Yeah, there's that too. So yes, there's some nuance there why Usyk's been inactive. Anyway, top wins were all Fury, AJ Dubois twice, all of them on the road, and I think half of those in his opponent's backyard. Okay. Now we get back to the pound for pound talk. So in recent years, Inoue has been the most dominant and the most active of the three. I would argue that Usyk has had to take on the most challenges and had the most faced the most adversity, both in and out of the ring, if you include what's been going on in his homeland, and the fact that he's had to travel and fight these guys in their backyard and fight significantly larger guys. Crawford has the biggest names, particularly in America, by beating Canelo. He's got the biggest name. Although you could argue that Anthony Joshua is every bit as huge in England and throughout Europe, and as Canelo is here in North America, you could certainly argue that Fury is on that status, that level as well. So on a global basis, perhaps the names on Usyk's resume are just as big as Canelo, although globally, Canelo obviously is a huge name as well, not just here in North America. So all that nuance matters. When it goes to like who you rate pound for pound, my particular justifications are your overall body of work, but also what have you done for me lately? And your wins, it's not just who you beat, but it's who, what, when, where, why. All the nuance I've been providing on this video. You guys know it's like my favorite word, nuance, right? All the context. Those things have to be factored into consideration as well. Here's the thing. We are in a really cool spot in boxing right now. This is a good problem to have. You have 3 guys where you can make a legitimate, intellectually logical debate that could be the number 1 guy, right? And then you have 2 guys in Crawford and Usyk that you could make an intellectually logical, reasonable debate are the fighter of this generation. A lot of times in boxing, you have a clear standout where you know who the fighter of the generation is. It's like you can't deny it. It's undeniable. And you know who the pound for pound king is. Right? You just can't deny it. So while it's good to have that kind of clarity, it's also sometimes it can get kind of boring because you know who the top dog is and everyone's chasing that top dog. Well, now we have a situation where pound for pound, it's these 3 guys and we can debate it. And that's kind of fun. And it's a good problem to have. And the fact that one of them's American, one of them's Ukrainian, one of them's Japanese, I think that adds some color to it. It makes it a more fun debate. It's a global debate. The fact that one of them is a small bantamweight guy, the other one is now like a welterweight / middleweight level guy, and the other one's a cruiserweight / heavyweight guy, that adds color to it and context and fun that we can debate. So it's a good problem to have. I think this is a good thing. We're in a good spot here. The negative part of it is that these 2 generational talents, they're on their way out. Crawford may have just fought his last fight last weekend, and I don't think Usyk has many more fights left either. So that kind of sucks. The silver lining in that is that Inoue is right there, right? And they're about to pass that torch to him. He's not going anywhere. As I said at the top of this video, he's still building his legacy. So that's the cool part of this. Crawford and Usyk are going to be going away in the next year or so, but Inoue ain't going nowhere for a while, right? So they're going to pass that torch to him, and it might be a situation where for the few years after Usyk and Crawford retire, Inoue is the clear number one, and then we're going to have to get some new guys coming up. So that's probably where we're at. Okay, let's talk about this era, and let's talk about where Canelo rates, and let's backpedal to Floyd Mayweather, because I think Terence Crawford, Usyk has done this as well, but Terence Crawford more has blown up certain narratives. My memories of Terence Crawford, like his legacy in my eyes, is that he is a narrative destroyer. And he's done this multiple times now with the Spence win and then the Canelo win. So I've talked about the Spence thing and the PBC whole thing with Crawford and how he just destroyed that whole thing and it just set Twitter ablaze. I've talked about that. Let's talk about this Canelo win. I think that we have to properly start rating Canelo now. And I've been saying this again, check the record. I've been saying this consistently for a long time. Canelo Alvarez is not an all-time great. At no point in his career did I look at Canelo and say, this guy is a generational talent who would compete in any middleweight era in the history of boxing. Never saw him that way. Doesn't mean I'm hating. Doesn't mean I don't recognize that he's a really, really good fighter. He was clearly the face of this generation. He was the most popular fighter. He carried the freaking sport for years, particularly right during COVID and right after COVID. I mean, he basically had the entire sport on his back for a year or two after COVID. He fought 3 times within a calendar year. He was the most active, popular fighter. I give Canelo tremendous credit for all that. I've also mentioned this. He's got my vote on the first ballot where he's eligible for the Hall of Fame. I will check his name. He's got my vote. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But he falls short of that all-time great. When I think all-time great, again, I'm beating up the same language here, but it's a generational type of talent that would compete in any era. I get that a good chunk of Canelo's career was fought at 154, but that's in the era of previous day weigh-ins and all the peptides and the stuff that you can take in between fights. From a historical perspective, if we're going back and comparing them to guys from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, I would kind of rate Canelo as a middleweight, right? That's kind of where he'd set in on same-day weigh-ins for the bulk of his career, and then super middleweight and up. And when I compare him to the all-time greats of middleweight, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. If Canelo were to fight in the 1980s, if he were to have fought in that era, he'd still maybe be a popular fighter, particularly in Mexico, but he wouldn't be 1/3 as popular as he is today for a multitude of reasons, right? The demographics of boxing and the country, America itself, have changed, and it's a different era and all the stuff, but he just wouldn't have been that memorable. Terence Crawford in the 1980s would probably be more popular than he is today. Think about that. Canelo Alvarez would be significantly less popular in the 1980s than he is today. Crawford would probably be more popular in the 80s than he is today for a multitude of reasons. And I think he would have competed. In all time, do I think Crawford beats the Robinsons, the Leonards, and guys like on that level? Not necessarily. No, I don't. But I think he's competitive. And that's the same way I view Usyk against the all-time great heavyweights. Do I think he beats all of the best heavyweights throughout the history of boxing? No, I don't. But I think he's competitive. That's the 2 guys from this era that I'd put up against any other era of boxing, and I think they'd compete. And I've been pretty consistent with that. I don't rate Canelo at that level. I just don't. He's never been on that level. What were Canelo's 4 biggest fights? The first Mayweather fight, which, he was very green for that fight. Floyd drained him. It's still one of his biggest fights. And it's actually where this narrative that Canelo is this all-time great, that's where it started. It started with the Floyd fans because they needed to bump Canelo up to prop up their guy, much the same way you saw them bumping up Fury to bolster their guy, Deontay Wilder. And there's a million other examples I could give, but it's the Floyd fight, it's the first Golovkin fight, it's the Bivol fight, it's the Crawford fight. Those are his 4 biggest fights and his 4 best opponents. How did he do in those fights? He lost all of them. He was shut out by Mayweather. Again, at that age and that level of experience and being unhealthy for that fight, I don't blame him on that. I don't hold that against him, but it is a fact. He was shut out by Mayweather. He lost 8 rounds to 4 against Golovkin in 2017. He lost 9 rounds to 3 at best against Bivol in 2022. And here in 2025, I scored it 9 rounds to 3 for Crawford. If you had it a little closer, you'll get no argument from me. But it was still a clear, at least 116, 112 type of win for Crawford, right? Those are his 4 biggest fights. Now we could go the next tier down. The rematch with Golovkin, the fight with Lara, and a couple others. How do you do in those fights? He won some highly debated decisions. Either way, those fights were really close. Even the fight with Austin Trout was pretty close, pretty competitive, right? So the top tier of his fights, he lost all of them. The tier just under that, it's debatable. But at best, he slightly barely won them. Okay? A guy like that, while I appreciate that Canelo has taken some challenges, and he didn't need to fight Floyd when he did. Although from a business perspective, it's part of how he became what he became. So it was a smart business move. But he didn't need to fight Lara when he fought Lara. He didn't need to fight Bivol when he did. He didn't need to fight Crawford here, but he did. So I do give him that credit. But we also have to talk about the other side of that. He did wait Golovkin out. He did avoid David Benavidez. He did. Does anyone in their right mind think that the version of Canelo we saw against Crawford Saturday beats Benavidez? I'm not sold on Benavidez, but I'm also not stupid. I think Benavidez would likely stop Canelo if they were to fight right now. I know Beterbiev sure would. Bivol might too. Style-wise, Bivol's not that kind of guy, but at this stage, he might stop Canelo. I know Beterbiev does, even at this stage of Beterbiev's career, and Benavidez probably does too. So all that, we have to mention it when we're rating Canelo all time. He's not an all-time great. Pound for pound, at one point, he was the top guy. I was totally fine rating him number 1 for a while. Again, it was right around COVID. But I also at that time added context to the super middleweight run he was on. And I said, hey, he's not fighting killers here, right? This isn't a murderer's row. He's going through guys who are pretty good, but not necessarily great. And the top challenge was David Benavidez, and he never fought him. And the WBC and other entities in the sport allowed that to happen. And again, I bring up this point for those of you who are just getting onto the show right now. If Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, if they were the undisputed super middleweight champion, do you think any of them would have been allowed to hold on to their WBC belt for years, plural, without fighting David Benavidez? You're fucking crazy if you think that. They allowed Canelo to do it because of politics. So Canelo has benefited from being the last superstar in a sport that has no more superstars, at least in America. And he has benefited greatly from that. Back up a previous generation, you could say the same thing about Floyd. Floyd was the only American superstar in a sport that had no more American superstars. And I think Floyd benefited from that tremendously. The only difference is there were other superstars in that era. Manny Pacquiao is every bit the superstar that Floyd Mayweather was. He was doing million-plus pay-per-view buys, fighting B-level guys, just like Floyd was, right? And so, and on a global basis, Vladimir Klitschko was way bigger in Europe, particularly Germany, than Floyd was in America. Manny was way bigger in the Philippines than Floyd was in America. So you had some global superstars in that era. You don't really have it the same in this era. Anthony Joshua, very, very popular, yes, but never quite on Canelo's level in terms of the money he brought in and things like that, especially in America. He fought in America, what, once? And how'd that fight go, right? Klitschko fought in America multiple times. Obviously, so did Pacquiao. So, but Floyd did benefit from being the last American guy. But Canelo's like the last period from any nationality superstar, right? That brings in significant money to Vegas and stuff, and he benefited from that. So I have to mention all this because I think it properly puts into context Canelo's real level. Hall of Fame worthy guy, yes. But when we look at his biggest fights and how he did, anybody calling him an all-time great is out of their fucking mind. And I've heard people say he's the best fighter in Mexican history. That is insane. Do I think Canelo's in the top 10 best fighters to come out of Mexico? Yes. I wouldn't put him in the top 5. He's in the lower tier of the top 10 all-time Mexican fighters. I grant him that distinction. I grant him Hall of Fame distinction. All-time great, no. And so now we backpedal to Floyd. And the only reason I mentioned Floyd is because he's connected to Canelo, right? Because a lot of every time Canelo would win a significant fight for years, Floyd Mayweather fans would respond by showing clips of Floyd's fight with Canelo. Yeah, y'all's boy, look what we did. They always say we like they did it. No, you didn't do shit. You sat on your couch and masturbated. Floyd actually did it. But that's what they do, right? They'd show that clip of Floyd outboxing a very, very green and malnourished Canelo Alvarez. And so I have to connect the links in this chain here. Also, there's been a lot of talk. I've seen it online the past few days of Canelo, Crawford beat Canelo, but look how our boy beat Canelo. We shut him out. We did this. Again, you didn't do shit, motherfucker. Your unemployed ass masturbated on your mama's couch. Floyd beat him. But I'm seeing those clips and those statements. Guys, neither Mayweather nor Crawford beat a prime version of Canelo. Okay. But I would say, all things considered, I'd rate Crawford's win over Canelo higher than Floyd's. I get that Floyd took the O and all the stuff, but if you look at Floyd's experience level at that fight and Canelo's experience level, and then the fact that he drained him, and I get it. Canelo and his team mentioned it. They offered it. They were willing to do it. I get all that. But Floyd did it. He said, you come in at 152, right? So if that's one of Floyd's best wins, that's kind of pathetic. And it shows his level. And we have to start backtracking now and really rating him honestly. But Canelo, yes, he's well past his best. He got his ass whooped the last time he fought a pound-for-pound guy when he fought Bivol. He was, by the way, he was rated pound-for-pound #1 in the world when Bivol fought him. Okay? I want you to keep that in the back of your head. Floyd was rated #1 when he fought Canelo. It was the other way around when Bivol fought him. So I rate Bivol's win over Canelo significantly higher than Floyd's win over Canelo. But I give Crawford the edge too, because Canelo, at least at this point, has all this experience. He's the top dog. He's the guy. He's the face of boxing, all this stuff. And Crawford had to technically move up to fight him. There was no rehydration clause or catch weights or any of this stuff, okay? Crawford beat the best version of Canelo that's available today. And he beat him very decisively. Floyd beat Canelo decisively too, but it was a very different situation. And so I mentioned all this because, again, some of the Floyd fans are saying, well, we beat him better than Crawford did because they're so fucking insecure. My thing is this. Floyd Mayweather would have never, ever, under any circumstances, fought a guy like Terence Crawford. Would have never happened. And I mentioned this on X, and a bunch of the Floyd groupies shit down my throat. And what I would say to them is this: Floyd wouldn't even fight a young, not even prime yet, Canelo Alvarez at his full weight. He wouldn't fight a one-legged Sergio Martinez, who is the legitimate lineal middleweight champion. That would have been an easy scalp for Floyd to get. Miguel Cotto did. And so Cotto got that prize. Floyd could have fought Martinez and beat him. He didn't do it. He didn't want to fight a guy like Golovkin. He didn't fight Paul Williams. He didn't fight little C.B. Johnson. He didn't fight Joel Casamayor. I mean, I could name so many names that Floyd didn't fight. And the guys he did fight, there was always some sort of controlled situation type of thing where they're bringing the guy up in weight. They're bringing him down in weight. There's a catch weight. There's rehydration this. There's all these little distinctions and little asterisks next to it. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in Floyd Mayweather's career. And it's being exposed more and more and more. His resume isn't aging as well post-retirement. It's actually, some of those flaws and holes are actually, the gaps are widening as time goes on in Floyd's resume. And for Crawford to, yes, I understand he didn't fight a true natural super middleweight and all this stuff, but at least on paper, he went up and fought a guy 2 divisions higher and beats him. Floyd never took a challenge like that at any point in his career. At any point in his career. So there is zero reason to think that in any possible way he would fight Terence Crawford. So now the question I'm having, we can debate whether it's Crawford or Usyk for fighter of this generation. Okay. Who do you rate higher, Floyd or Crawford? Now, in terms of resume, it's no comparison. Floyd's resume is light years better than Crawford's. I'm not going to debate that. Clearly, Floyd's resume, with all the names and the consistency, Floyd fought twice a year. He was fighting on the 2 Mexican holidays every year, okay? And before Floyd moved up to like 140, 147, he really had some really, really good wins at 30 and 35. Really, really good wins. And he was actually fun to watch in that era. So he wasn't a businessman yet. He was still a fighter, right? When he was with Top Rank, it was actually fun watching him fight, man. But Floyd's resume, light years better, no argument for me. I'm asking head to head, if these two fight, head to head at welterweight, at 147 or even 154, who do you like? Do you like Floyd or do you like Bud? That's going to be the discussion we're going to be having in the coming months and maybe coming years, depending on what Crawford does from here. That's going to be an interesting discussion because that's not so white and black. The people that would just say, oh, Floyd, instantly. Are you sure about that? Because I tell you, you know who's not sure about that? Floyd. That's why Floyd wouldn't fight Crawford. That's why he wouldn't even fight Canelo at his best. I'm just saying. I think regardless of what Crawford has said publicly, him and his team could see the things in Canelo that guys like me could see, and they made the calculation, they took a risk, right? And so, he said certain things in public. That's all just media work. Backstage, in private, they knew where Canelo was at this stage of his career, and they knew it was a smart, good risk to take, taking this fight. Floyd had opportunities like that in his career. He didn't do it. And I'm not saying fighting Sergio Martinez would have been anywhere near as big of an event as Crawford fighting Canelo. I understand that Crawford was the B side here. Floyd would have been the A+++ side against Sergio and Golovkin. I get it. All I'm saying is Floyd never took a challenge like this at any point in his career. And I think that's significant. I think we have to talk about that. So head-to-head, Mayweather versus Crawford, interesting discussion. Real interesting. And Crawford has blown up a narrative that Canelo was this all-time great level fighter. And he's not the only one, but I think now it's just undeniable. People have to recognize Canelo's true level. And we can backtrack this to the previous generation. Let's also talk about Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao could have fought Terence Crawford. There was at one point where they were both with Top Rank. Bob Arum wanted it. Terence Crawford wanted it. You know who did not want any fucking part of it? Freddie Roach. He wanted no part of that shit. There was no way Pacquiao was going to fight Crawford. Because, look, I realized that Pacquiao got knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez, and regardless of what Marquez was doing outside the ring at that time, it was a shocking knockout, right? Natural or not. But that fight was really competitive. In fact, Pacquiao had hurt and put Marquez down before he got knocked out, right? If Pacquiao had fought Crawford, it would have looked like the Errol Spence fight for the most part. I think Pac would have had some moments early on, and then Crawford would have made adjustments, and it would have been one-way traffic. It would have been the most decisive loss of Pacquiao's career, in my humble opinion, especially because I think it would have been at 47, just in terms of styles. So I'm not just going to pick on Floyd here. I got to pick on Manny too. The only difference between Floyd and Manny is Manny took significant challenges in his career. He fought a ton of guys he didn't need to fight at times where he didn't need to fight them. Floyd never did that. So Manny's legacy is going to be talked about. Manny's going to be talked about and beloved by fight fans for years past Floyd will be. But all this stuff now has to come to light, and we have to discuss it. Let me jump to some super chats real quick. I want to make sure I don't forget you guys. I got to go soon here, but wow, we got a bunch of, man, the chat is on fire. Holy shit. There's no way I could get to anywhere near half of these comments. Super chat from Papa Chubby. Thank you so much. He says, decade only half over, COVID 2, countless undisputed. Yeah. Appreciate the super chat, my man. Decade is a half over. Isn't that crazy, dude? Crazy. We're staring down the second half of the decade. Let's see. Beast LFC, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, yo, Mike, what's your thoughts on Moses Ituma being the next top prospect in heavyweight and potential top heavyweight in the future? Yeah, so he's fun as hell to watch, and he does have really nice skills. Offensively, he does a lot of things really well. We don't know how he takes a shot. He hasn't fought anybody that can punch back yet. I think it's way too soon to put him in there against Alexander Usyk. I think that'd be a huge mistake. He's young as hell, dude. They need to develop that guy and give him a couple more years. Let Usyk complete his era and his legacy, and then go off into the sunset, and then all the belts will be vacant, and they can move Ituma into a vacant belt, and then let him kind of collect the belts and clean out the division. Plenty of time to let him develop. There's just no need to rush it. If he were to fight Usyk right now, it's not that I would just fear he would lose, because he would lose, but it's how he would lose. It would be devastating. And you could potentially destroy a brand while it's being built. I'm not one for marinating fights and all this. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, but you got to develop this guy the right way. There's just no reason to throw him in there against the top guys. It would be like taking the top high school football, I'm talking American football, prospect in America, and throwing him in the NFL, in the Super Bowl. Like, why are you going to do that? Let the kid develop a little bit. That's where he's at. So tremendous potential, looks the part, all of it. And the fact that he's British heavyweights are the premier heavyweights in the world in recent years, right? You guys know all the names. He could be the next one. He could be a huge star, and this sport desperately needs them. So let the kid develop. Give him a few more fights before you throw him in there with an elite level heavyweight. There aren't many more left, but I'm just saying he's not quite there. Okay, I'm trying to think if I mentioned every single point that I wanted to mention. I think I have. So real quick to wrap this up, guys. This isn't me hating on anybody. It's me just trying to provide real context. I think there's a recency bias and people getting really, really overexcited. I think this was a tremendous accomplishment for Crawford. He has now secured his legacy as a 3-division undisputed champion. He's the first guy to do that in the 4-belt era. I think there will be others, obviously, but he's the first one to do it. And But if we're talking about him, like Max Kellerman was calling him the GOAT, there are people online calling him the GOAT. Well, then we have to mention some details. He did clean out 140. It was a really weak division. He didn't clean out welterweight. He held one belt. He beat a very weak title holder in Jeff Horn. And then he fought the guy who had cleaned out the division in Errol Spence and whooped him. But Spence was arguably shot to shit in that fight, definitely past his best after things that had happened outside the ring. I still gave Crawford full credit because I thought he would have beat any version of Errol Spence. I thought Spence was overrated. But the fact is that welterweight division was a little overrated, if we're being honest. It was overrated, that whole division. And the reason why it was overrated was due to politics and the association that people at that promotion had with the American boxing writers. But Crawford didn't clean it out. Spence did, and then he beat Spence. Crawford didn't clean out super middleweight. Canelo did, and he didn't even fight the top guy, who was Benavidez. That would have been the top challenger, and it was a really weak division. The super middleweight division that that Canelo cleaned out was really maybe slightly better than the junior welterweight division that Crawford cleaned out, but not that much better. And so Canelo cleaned it out. It was allowed to hold on to his undisputed championship due to politics and money. And then Crawford beat him. So it's not as if Crawford cleaned out three divisions, if we're being honest. He cleaned out one, and he beat the guy who had done the work in the other two divisions. I still give him credit for that. But when I compare that to Usyk and his two undisputed championships at cruiserweight and heavyweight, Usyk cleaned out both divisions. He legitimately cleaned them out, beat the top 3, 4, 5 guys, and did it exclusively on the road, oftentimes in his opponent's backyard. And there was no fluff. There was a couple of fights at heavyweight to acclimate to the weight, and then he's got in there and started fighting the top guys. When I look at Inoue, the two divisions he cleaned out, bantamweight and super bantamweight, not the strongest divisions, but I think certainly stronger than the 140 division that Bud cleaned out, or at least as strong as that division or the super middleweight division that Canelo cleaned out. And Inoue cleaned those divisions out. If you look at 122 right now, I think he has wins over the top 3 contenders and either 4 or 5 guys who are in the top 10. So that's cleaning out a division. Crawford didn't do that. It's just another important distinction to make, okay? In the end, though, I'll just wrap it up. The two premier fighters of this generation, the two generational talents, the two fighters of this generation, Terence Crawford, Alexander Usyk. Maybe it's 1A, 1B. Take your pick. You can't go wrong either way. I have my reasons for saying I believe it's Usyk, but I got Crawford right there behind him. Pound for pound, top fighter in the world right now. It's either between Crawford, Usyk, or Inoue. You get no argument from me, whichever one you rate number one. I have my reasonings for rating Usyk number one. I've stated those. I've been consistent about them. But you will get zero argument from me if you rate Crawford number one or Inoue number one. Canelo, good fighter, damn good fighter. At his absolute best, he was a damn good fighter. Tough night at the office for anybody. All-time great fighter? No. In the top 4, 5, 6 fights of his career, he only won a couple of them, and they were by highly disputed, controversial decisions. But the top 4 fights of his career, Floyd, Crawford, Bivol, and the first Golovkin fight, he lost all of those and lost them decisively, okay? So we have to rate him properly. And then the discussion I'm hearing between Floyd Mayweather and Terence Crawford, head-to-head. In terms of resume, Floyd's is light years better. In terms of head-to-head, Floyd would have never fought Crawford. So it's not even worth getting into because Floyd would have never fought him. And I think we have to start rating that previous era. We have to start looking at it in a different light because Pacquiao did avoid Crawford. He had a chance to fight him, and he didn't. And Floyd would have never fought Crawford under any circumstances. So we have to start putting things in proper perspective. Okay, guys. Let's see. Hamed says, Canelo was great, Mike. If he's past his prime, then the all-time great argument doesn't make sense. Yes, it does, Hamed. How could you possibly rate Canelo an all-time great if the top 4 fights of his career, he lost them decisively? In the tier just under that, he barely won them with much controversy. How could you say this guy's an all-time great? He's just not. It's okay to say that. Again, first ballot Hall of Famer, but all-time great? No, he's just not on that level. It's like Miguel Cotto, damn good fighter. I voted for Cotto in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, but not an all-time great. One of the top 10 Puerto Rican fighters of all time, but not an all-time great. That's the kind of distinction I'm making here. It's just a different thing. Hamed says Crawford's accomplishments are light years ahead, though. How many divisions did Floyd even unify? That's a good point, Hamed. I'm just saying in terms of names, Floyd's got a lot more names. Now, again, he fought those guys past their best. He moved them up in weight. He moved them down in weight, but he does have more names. That's why I say his resume is ahead of Crawford's. One last point I forgot to mention earlier. All the people calling this huge upset win for Crawford over Canelo. Oh, this was this historic, huge upset win. Oh my gosh. If all of you were picking him the week of the fight, if every pundit and YouTuber and podcaster and media guy was picking Crawford the week of the fight, and all of the significant American money coming into Vegas was going on Crawford, and the only reason Canelo was still the betting favorite is because of the Mexican money coming in on him, how the fuck was this an upset? How? Some of you are acting like this was Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson or something. This wasn't even Fury getting beat by Usyk. Sorry, it wasn't. I get that on the big stage in America, it was in terms of the significance because of the names involved and stuff. But I'm just telling you, the betting odds, I looked this up too, and I tweeted about this. The opening betting odds for Fury Usyk were wider in favor of Fury than the opening betting odds for Canelo Crawford. The odds for both fights tightened up as the fights approached. But again, Canelo, they tightened up more for Fury Usyk for a couple of reasons. The biggest one was because Fury looked so bad against Ngannou. And people have a recency bias. They couldn't understand that, like, he didn't take Ngannou seriously and he looked like shit because Fury wasn't the most consistent professional. But on the other side, again, and I know I'm repeating this, but with Canelo Crawford, there was still significant Mexican money coming in on Canelo, which kept the odds a little bit wider. But again, my bookie dudes would tell all of you, the international money, and particularly the American money, was all coming in on Crawford. All of it. So there is, it's a little skewed, but I can tell you, Google it. Don't take my word for it. The opening odds for Fury Usyk were wider than the opening odds for Canelo Crawford. The professional bookmakers, the people who make a living doing this, saw one fight wider than the other. So again, I ask, if all of you suddenly picked Crawford last week, how the fuck is this some huge upset? You're making me sound like a Crawford hater, and I'm not. I'm really not, but I'm just trying to put this in proper context. Okay. Let's see. Miguel says, I was pretty confident Crawford would win, so it's not a major upset. That's all I'm saying, brother. That's all I'm saying. Phil makes a great point here. Phil Miles says a lot of Mexicans are going for Crawford, me included. That's a great point, Phil. Well, a lot of Mexican Americans, I did notice a lot of Mexican Americans were going for Crawford. You're absolutely correct about that. Even a few guys in my gym that I train at, same thing. BSBB makes an interesting point here, and I might have to consider this. He says, being a top 10 Puerto Rican all-time fighter automatically makes you an all-time great. You know, that's an interesting point. I have to think about that. Dude, that's one of the best comments someone's made in a while, because that made me just sit back and go, I'm going to have to reevaluate my position. Damn good comment, brother. Damn good, because you do make a point. maybe I have to reevaluate my definition of all-time great. When I mean all-time greats, I'm talking just globally in the history of boxing. When I'm looking at like the top 10 pound for pound fighters, the top 20, 25 pound for pound fighters of all time, guys that would compete with them, guys that are kind of on that level in that discussion. I just don't put Miguel Cotto or Canelo Alvarez in that discussion. I just don't. But Puerto Rico does have a rich boxing tradition, as does Mexico, particularly Mexico. And if you are one of the top 10 fighters from that country, from one of those countries, um, that's a really good point that it does make you, in a way, it's making you an all-time great. So damn good comment, dude. That's gonna fuck me up for the rest of the day, bro. Good job with that. All right, guys. I gotta wrap it up, but Hamed has an interesting question here. Who's more of an all-time great, Klitschko or Canelo? Klitschko easily. Vladimir Klitschko easily. And I know where you're going to go with that, Hamed, about the losses. I get that. But look at what Klitschko did for a decade of owning a division. And there was no controversy in any of his decisions. But Klitschko's accomplishments, in my opinion, more significant historically than Canelo's. But I see where you're going to try to take that one. I see. I know where you're going to go with that. Wheelchair John, what's up, brother? Haven't heard from you in a while. Always leaves amazing, great comments. He says, anyone who is paying attention to Canelo's recent performances should have seen this coming. I'm not a betting man, but now I wish I would have put money on Crawford. Yeah, me too, bro. I never gamble because I grew up in a neighborhood seeing wise guys milk degenerate gamblers, and I saw how it ruined people's lives. Same thing with drugs. I saw drugs and gambling just ruin lives of like people all in my neighborhood that I grew up in. And I told myself I'd never do either. So here we are. I wish I could gamble, though. I wish I did gamble because, oh boy, boxing fans make it easy sometimes, John. They really, really do. Hamed says, Usyk, Crawford, Mayweather, Pacquiao are all-time greats. Completely agree. All four of them, all-time greats. No argument from me. Completely agree with that. Vibe Calisthenics says, all-time great means you arguably could beat anyone. Sugar Ray Leonard, Robinson, Floyd, Crawford, etc. Yeah, I like that first sentence. I don't agree with some of the names in the second sentence, but it means arguably on any given night you could beat anyone. I like that. So again, I don't rate Canelo there. I don't rate Cotto. I don't rate him there. But obviously I rate Ray Leonard there. I rate Ray Robinson there. Floyd maybe on any given night. Sure, maybe he could beat one of those guys. Crawford on any given night could beat one of those guys. I would favor Leonard and Robinson to beat Floyd 9 times out of 10, but there's always that 10th time. But yeah, I like that description. That's certainly a pretty good description. Okay, guys, I got to jump. It's been fun. We'll do it again soon. I promise we'll do a full show soon where we could do phone calls, okay? Schedule's kind of bleak for a while, but as soon as I can, we'll do a show with phone calls. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your week and let the debate rage on. Until next time.